Our next panel, we're going to hear about how radioactive waste is managed today in Canada, as well as the regulatory system around that. We'll also hear about projects that are underway to manage some of Canada's radioactive waste over the long term. Chairing this panel is Ms. Kavita Murthy, and she is the Director General of the Directorate of Nuclear Cycle and Facilities Regulation at the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission. Prior to this role, Kavita was the Director of the Canadian Nuclear Laboratories Oversight Division, and she also was the driving force behind evolving the Accelerator and Class 2 Facilities Division, also at the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission. Her colleagues, of which I am happy to say I had the privilege of being one in my career, remark on her innovation, technical expertise, and strong leadership. Joining Kavita in this panel is a group of distinguished industry guests who she will introduce shortly. And there will be questions at the end of the panel session. So please use the Engage tab to ask questions, or you can vote for questions that others have asked. Kavita, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Corinne, for that introduction. And welcome everyone to this afternoon panel. Hope you all had a good lunch break. As Corinne said, my name is Kavita Murthy and I work at the CNSC. Last year, Canada took an important step, announcing a review of the radioactive waste policy and the development of an integrated waste strategy. However, there's still a need for the government to make timely decisions on waste management solutions that are evidence-based and broadly accepted, even as this takes place. At our commission proceedings, the long-term management of nuclear waste is a top public concern, as evidenced by the number of interventions we get, the number of commission, the amount of time the commission proceedings devote to the addressing of these questions. As a regulator, the CNSC believes that a long-term solution for radioactive waste is a key prerequisite for new nuclear having any future in Canada. On that note, I am very happy to introduce the speakers on this panel. The panel, as you know, is called Taking Stock, How Waste is Managed Today. And we will have with us 4 very distinguished and experienced people in the nuclear sector, particularly with particular interest in waste management. The first speaker for today is Jason Van Wart from the Ontario Power Generation, who will go first and do his presentation. Jason is the VP of Nuclear Waste Management and Commercial Services at OPG. He oversees OPG's nuclear waste management services, as well as OPG's isotope and heavy water sales. Interesting note about Jason is that he grew up in St. John, New Brunswick, and looks forward to visiting each summer. Next, we will have Mooney from Cameco, who is Vice President, Safety, Health, Environment, Quality, and Regulatory Relations at that company. Since 2011, he has led the corporate team that is largely based in Saskatoon, with a presence in Ontario as well. His group looks after compliance and licensing, management systems, transportations, emergency response, security, environmental assessments, energy management, and geo-environmental engineering. Liam tells me that he adopted a Boston Terrier French Bulldog cross puppy late in 2020, and they thought that it would be a good companion for their family's Boston Terrier, but not having very much luck with that. Next, we have Mike Gull from the Canadian Nuclear Laboratories. Mike Gull has 32 years of experience in the nuclear industry and has held leadership roles in safely delivering missions, including commercial power generation, defueling, decommissioning, and waste management. Mike has completed most of Mike's career has been in the UK and Northern Europe, and Mike has completed 2 years in Canada working in various senior leadership roles at CNL. And last but not least, we have Mahrez Belfadhel from the Nuclear Waste Management Organization. Dr. Belfadhel is Vice President of Site Selection at the NWMO. He has been with the NWMO for 14 years as a technical leader in both technical assessments and community engagement. Dr. Belfadhel has more than 30 years of academic, regulatory, and industrial experience in areas related to geoenvironmental engineering and radioactive waste management. Prior to joining the NWMO, he was with the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission. He has a bachelor's degree in civil engineering and a PhD in geotechnical engineering. He's also a registered professional engineer. And I believe this is Dr. Belfadhel's last week of work at the NWMO, and he's retiring next week. So good luck to him. And good luck to all the panel members. Each speaker will be discussing the ways in which they manage their radioactive waste today and any long-term waste management plans being implemented, including potential disposal projects. Jason, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Kavita. And thanks to all the other speakers for appearing with me today. I'm coming to you from the shores of Lake Huron. I'm a 20-year veteran with OPG and in the nuclear industry, but I'm relatively new to the waste management group. So I'm going to do my best today to represent all of the nuclear professionals that do just a fantastic job with nuclear waste at OPG. So to start, how is OPG managing waste today? Well, we're handling it with care. We have 3 nuclear waste facilities, one at Pickering, one at Darlington, and one at the Bruce site. These facilities are licensed by the CNSC. They're inspected by the CNSC and other third parties. We have over 50 years of experience handling nuclear waste, and we apply the concept of the waste hierarchy to our waste. We see it as a critical feature of a safe, environmentally and socially responsible waste management system. We support waste minimization at OPG, and we sort, segregate, and incinerate our low-level waste. Through incineration, we can process 50% of our low-level waste, which helps reduce its volumes by more than 90%. OPG is committed to developing lasting solutions for permanent waste disposal. For spent fuels, we believe DGRs are considered best practice around the world, and we're very interested to see where the NRCan and NWMO discussions go on these topics. However, before waste gets to final disposal, as I mentioned, we want to focus on waste minimization at OPG. We want to do waste minimization that aligns with our ALERA principles and policies. And to do this, we want to focus on the 3 R's. We reduce, we reuse, and we recycle at OPG. We want to find clean materials such as coppers and steels and make sure that they're recycled. We're focused on using innovation as well at OPG. This will really help improve our waste minimization efforts. And I think there's a couple of examples I'd like to cite from just this past year that really made a big difference at OPG. We've recently engaged McMaster University and Laurentis Energy Partners, which is a subsidiary of OPG, on a low-level waste sort and segregation facility. Mac and Laurentis have opened what we call a Clean Energy Recycling Center in Hamilton. It's a laboratory designed to investigate new methods for sorting waste. This project, which I'm proud to say has brought more than 30 new jobs to Hamilton during the pandemic, will help OPG reduce low-level waste through investigation of new techniques like waste characterization, automation of waste sorting, and we have another example, which is our work with volume reduction on waste materials coming from our Darlington refurbishment project. OPG, working with a third-party vendor, Energy Solutions, has been able to reduce the volume of our PHT piping that have come from the refurbished units by more than 90% by applying melting techniques to that material. What I'm very happy to say is these 2 projects show the potential of innovation to impact on our 3 R's. And we plan to further invest as time goes along. We would like to really thank these companies that we're working with, and we look forward to engaging other companies as we go forward. So Kavita, I don't want to speak too much more at the moment. We have 3 other panelists. I want to give them lots of time and then take time for questions. So I'll turn it back to you there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jason. That's great. I believe, Liam, you're ready to speak. So if you are, then please go ahead. The floor is yours.
Good morning or good afternoon, wherever you are. For the record, I'm Liam Mooney, the Vice President of, that's an inside joke. So I'm pleased to be here with you today to provide some of my thoughts on how radioactive waste is managed today, as the name of our panel suggests. For my company, Cameco, one of the biggest waste-related projects we have underway is what we call Vision in Motion. That's taking place in and around our Port Hope conversion facility. So while that project is technically all about legacy waste, the manner in which we are dealing with these wastes is certainly of the here and now. The Vision in Motion project is a significant long-term investment in the Port Hope conversion facility site. By way of background briefly, as a result of decades of operations with nuclear materials predating the formation of Cameco in 1988, significant quantities of low-level radioactive waste were accumulated and stored in warehouses in Port Hope. At the beginning of the project, an estimated 35,000 drums of accumulated waste were attributable to the operations of El Dorado Nuclear and therefore eligible for disposal at the long-term waste management facility. The drums were primarily contaminated non-combustible materials such as soil, concrete, asbestos, and small metal parts, as well as some production waste. The long-term waste management facility opened up to the receipt of Cameco waste in June 2018, and Cameco's first shipment was made on June 20th, 2018. As of December 1st, 2020, 985 shipments of packaged waste have been made to the long-term waste management facility from the Center Pier property, Dorset Street warehouses, and in the main site, reducing the accumulated waste inventory by approximately 50%. For this project, we conducted a comprehensive study environmental assessment under the former Canadian Environmental Assessment Act and received approval from the CNSC Commission. The work to address the accumulated waste inventory has been completed in a manner that has protected the people and the environment. All regulatory requirements have been considered in the planning of work activities and appropriate preventative and corrective actions taken throughout the project. This includes containment measures at loading docks, dust extraction, work planning for containment of compromised drums, multiple barriers for containment, personal protective equipment, and area and environmental monitoring. Over the last 3 years, we've reduced the inventory of accumulated waste by approximately 50%, and that has been achieved by a variety of smaller sub-projects, each successful. After each of the projects, lessons learned are reviewed and opportunities for the next project explored. My colleagues submitted a paper to the Waste Management Symposium in 2020 that featured some key takeaways that I believe provide a window into the mindset as how these projects can succeed and how waste can be managed in the future. The first was to start with a straightforward activity or low-hanging fruit. The second was simpler is often better. And the third was don't be overwhelmed by the entire project. Fourth was build the right team. And in each of those regards, I only have 5 minutes, but picking on build the right team, when we look at the small dedicated team who've worked on this project, they've learned through experience in the various phases of it. And that those team members develop trust and as a result in creative solutions to challenges that may not have arisen in an environment where team members are constantly changing. The last point that we would highlight in relation to waste management, both of the legacy waste, but going forward, is planning is critical, but flexibility is essential. So it's essential to plan the work to ensure that the right tools are available, that safety considerations are made, and to ensure that project objectives are met. However, it is just as important to be prepared for the unexpected. As sometimes it will be the seemingly perfect situation that will become something that you have to deal with. In reducing the accumulated legacy waste by 50% already, Cameco has safely carried out the VIM project work as planned in a manner that protects the workers, public, and the environment while maintaining a collaborative working relationship with Canadian Nuclear Laboratories and the municipality of Port Hope. The end result will be a much improved facility that accords with the input from stakeholders while taking the opportunity to remove legacy waste. With that, I'll turn it over to the next presenter for additional comments.
Thank you, Liam. I believe Michael is still sorting out some technical difficulties. So, Dr. Belfadhel, if you're ready, we'll go with you, and hopefully by the time you're done, we'll have sorted out the problems. So, Dr. Belfadhel, the floor is yours.
And it is really a great pleasure to be here and provide an update on how the NWMO is advancing Canada's plan for the long-term management of use nuclear fuel. And I am very happy to share this stage with distinguished colleagues. So, do you see my slides? Hello?
Yes, I can see. We can see your slides.
Okay. So the NWMO was established in 22, and our mandate was to work with Canadians and develop an approach for the long-term management of used nuclear fuel. And the approach, an approach that is socially acceptable, technically sound, and environmentally responsible and economically feasible. So the NWMO is currently implementing adaptive phased management, or APM, which is both a technical method and a management system. From a technical perspective, the end point is to contain and isolate used nuclear fuel in a deep geological repository in a suitable geological formation. And used fuel will be continuously monitored, and it will remain retrievable for an extended period of time. So most importantly, this method is being implemented using a management system that reflects the approaches that Canadians told us are important, including flexible implementation, clear and adaptable decision-making, and an open, inclusive, and fair site selection process. So the NWMO is actively pursuing the siting and the development of a deep geological repository for used nuclear fuel. And this is a major national infrastructure project that will be designed to protect people and the environment for generations to come. It is a high technology project that will be strongly regulated, and it will be implemented in partnerships between the NWMO and communities, both municipal and indigenous communities. And it is a significant investment of $24 billion, and it will offer an opportunity for decades of sustainable development. So now we are often asked, why APM? Why a DGR, and why now? And why don't you leave it where it is safely managed today? APM emerged from many years of dialogues with Canadians from all walks of life, and with Canadians with a diversity of views. And these are the very same questions that we explored with Canadians very early on. We had an opportunity, or we had open dialogues with many individuals and groups across the country, including nuclear site communities, environmental organizations, young people, technical and social experts, indigenous people, and so on. And together, we spent the time to explore many topics, such as the nature of the hazards, and most importantly, what are the societal, the technical, and ethical questions that we as a society, we need to consider when looking at possible management approaches. And at the end of the day, considering all that, the DGR method emerged as the method that responds the best to people objectives and priorities. And Canadians told us very clearly that a long-term management plan is needed. Doing nothing is not an option. And whatever we do, we have to do it in a safe and secure manner. And this generation must take action now, because we owe it to future generations, and so on. And the other thing, what Canadians told us is very consistent with what's happening currently internationally. There is an international consensus as we speak that the safest method we have today is the deep geological repository. And this is why the DGR method is being pursued by all countries with nuclear programs today. So central to APM is the implementation of a fair and inclusive site selection process to seek an informed and willing host. So we initiated a site selection process, our site selection process in 2010. And by 2012, we had 22 communities that expressed interest in learning more about Canada's plan. And through a series of technical and social assessments, we were able to narrow down the number of communities to 2. Now we have in the north the community of Ignis, and in the south we have the community of South Bruce. And in addition to these 2 municipalities, we are working with many Indigenous communities in both siting areas. So these are our project timelines. So we are at the site selection stage where communities are learning about the project and we're learning about the communities. Our goal is to select a preferred site by 2023. And once we select a site, we will begin, we will initiate the regulatory approval process. And we anticipate that that process will take about 8 years. We are hoping to obtain a license to construct around 2032. And then we will begin the design and the construction of the repository, and we will begin operation around 2043. So how are we going to select a site? If you look at our site selection process, the 2010 document, we have included a large number of technical and social factors that we are going to use to assess the suitability of the sites. And all those criteria can be summarized with 3 overarching ones. One is the confidence to build a robust safety case. The other one is the confidence that we will be able to develop a transportation plan that is safe, secure, and socially acceptable. And finally, the confidence that we will be able to develop the resilient and supportive partnerships that are required for a project like ours. So together with our communities over the last 10 years, we achieved significant progress in many areas. We've been building awareness and support in siting areas. We continued engaging Canadians. We have advanced our field investigations to assess safety. We are exploring the potential for partnerships in both our siting areas. We developed a transportation planning framework that we developed in dialogue with Canadians. We are advancing our reconciliation program, and we secured access to private land in Southern Ontario. So we have the land we need should we select Southern Ontario as a preferred site. In parallel to all this work, we are also advancing our engineering work to design and develop our multiple barrier system, which is core to safety. We are also developing readiness for the regulatory process that we will initiate once we select a site. And we are actively pursuing international collaboration to ensure that we, as Canadian requested, that we do follow best practices and best standards. So I will leave you with this commitment that we made very early on in our process, that the project, our project, will only proceed with the involvement of municipal and Indigenous communities in the area and surrounding communities working in partnership to implement it. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Ben. I believe, unfortunately, that Mike Gull is still experiencing problems connecting. So we will proceed with a round of questions. We have received a couple so far. I just want to start by saying that Liam Mooney wishes it to be known that this is not his study. This is his kid's bedroom, just in case you were thinking that that's his study. So I've cleared the record for you, Liam. And there was a question about presentations, whether the presentations are going to be available after the session. I believe the answer is yes. those presentations will be available. So there is a question we have received around DGRs, and it goes as follows. Which successful DGRs around the world is Canada using as an example for best practices? This goes to you, Ben.
Yeah, thanks for the question. So as I mentioned, we collaborate very closely with our international partners, and we are benefiting from great advances in technologies related to DGRs, and our partners are benefiting from the work that we are doing here in Canada as well. So basically, we are all in it together, and we are all using state-of-the-art technologies to design and advance the development of the DGRs.
Thank you. So are there operating DGRs in other parts of the world? Are we the first?
So in terms of operating DGRs, maybe just if I step back, for used nuclear fuel, the most advanced country is Finland. Finland, they have a site. They constructed the site, and they are about to prepare the repository for operations. And there are other countries that are well advanced. They have identified sites. For example, Sweden, they worked like Canada with the willing host, and they identified the site, and they are going through the regulatory processes to begin the construction of a site. But there are the operating DGRs for other forms of waste. For example, in Finland and in Sweden, they have DGRs for intermediate level waste that are successfully operating. Korea, the same thing. They have a DGR for intermediate level waste. And in New Mexico, there is a DGR for high level waste that has been operated successfully today.
Thank you. I will pass a similar question to Liam and also to Jason. In terms of industry experience, with respect to mining in particular, for Liam, my tailing management is a way of waste management that is used. So how does the uranium mining industry take into account international experience and experience from other mining sectors, not just the uranium, in managing the waste? And similarly, for Jason, with respect to the waste that are generated in that you're now managing, where does the international experience come in your strategies?
Thanks for the question, Kavita. We do have operations internationally, but they use the ISR form of mining, so they don't have tailings deposits or waste rock deposits per se. But we do have a pretty good line of sight on best practices through the Mining Association of Canada. We're a member there, and we have a number of a focus on tailings over the last number of years. They have revised the tailings protocol that we use to evaluate our tailings facilities, and that towards sustainable mining, the tailings protocol has been adopted internationally as well. There's also an international standard, global standard for tailings management that was published late last year, and that will inform our tailings management approach. I think for our facilities in Saskatchewan, right now, the active tailings facilities are ones that are in pit, and there we have what we would say is best in class facilities, given the ability to design your tailings facilities such that it's designed for the long term. So, you know, a big part of this goes back to the very beginning of these projects when they're assessed, for the construction, operation, and decommissioning. And that goes into the environmental assessments that are conducted both provincially and federally, but also the C2C licensing process and the questions that were asked by the Commission during that process. So I think that overall, we have an eye on international practices, and they inform our own practices. And to some extent, our practices drive some of the international practices as well.
Thanks, Liam. So for us to answer your question, Kavita, I'd sort of think of it from three different angles in terms of our international engagements. The first one being, from an operational perspective, whether it's WANO or IMPO, OPG is actively engaged internationally with other nuclear power generators. And through those interactions, whether it's diversion at source, waste minimization techniques, we're always engaging with those organizations on best practices and what we can adopt at our facilities. Then there is the Canadian industry and what's specifically applicable to us. So we have the CANDU Owners Group that we use to engage our other international cousins in the CANDU industry, and our immediate relationships, whether it's with New Brunswick Power, with Hydro-Quebec, with Cernavoda in Romania. We engage with those partners as well. And then I think third, you heard me mention about waste minimization of our feeder pipes, our primary heat transport pipes. So we're actively engaging with vendors around the world who have techniques, technology, intellectual property that will help us manage our waste better, achieve some of our minimization goals, help us manage our incinerator and find the best ways to operate that incinerator. So we look at it sort of at three different levels.
Thank you. There are a few questions on DGR. I'll do one, and then maybe we'll go around. So this question is very interesting. It's around community consent and what consent looks like. And I think globally, this applies to more than just what NWMO's project is, because it's a question that comes up for other matters related to nuclear as well. So from Dr. Belfadhel, is community consent required to establish a DGR? And what will be the threshold for community consent to host a DGR? Where would you say you have got enough consent that you can go ahead?
Yeah, I think the question of willingness and the question of consent is central to what we do, central to APM. Our site selection process that we published in 2010 included a number of commitment and principles that are related to willingness. And the core principle that we included in the site selection process is that our approach is to seek an informed and willing host, an informed and willing host. And by the way, these principles that we included, they didn't come just from the NWMO. They came from the dialogues, the many years of dialogue that we had with the Canadians. So we are seeking an informed and willing host. And what we say in our site selection process is that before we select a community, we would like to see a compelling demonstration of willingness. And that willingness should not come just from the leadership. It should come from the grassroots, from community members themselves. Now, when it comes, what is willingness and how communities are going to express that willingness, what we said in our site selection process, it is up to the communities to decide how they want to demonstrate their willingness and what are the tools and the processes that they want to use to express that willingness. But what is clear is we would like to see a compelling demonstration of willingness.
Thank you. So there are a couple of very detailed questions on NWMO's work that is going on. I think I don't want to kind of go too deep into the technical sort of questions, but I know you can see the questions, and so if there is an avenue to share information on that, we can use that. I do want to get to questions that sort of speak to the focus of this group. So again, we as the CNSC, we do hear from a lot of the public during our public hearings and meetings, and one of the concerns that persistently comes up is related to the transportation of radioactive waste on public roads, and concerns that this cannot be done safely, or this is a risky activity. So from perhaps we will start once again with Jason and Liam, because you are active operators, and then maybe we'll go on to Ben to give us some perspective on what they're looking at. So so if you were to address this question on transportation of waste, how would you answer that to someone who believes that this activity is dangerous?
I'll start, Liam, I guess.
I can start, Jason, if that's all right.
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. I'll go ahead, Liam.
All right,
sure.
Who's on first?
Yeah, exactly.
So, okay.
That was kind of funny. Okay, so from our perspective, and I apologize for that, Liam, we believe nuclear transportation is the safest thing on the road. We're really proud of our drivers. In 50 years of OPG transportation, there have been no accidents involving any injury to any of the drivers or any member of the public, and no release of radiation. Our drivers are trained to the highest standards, and we continually reinforce that training. Trucks are monitored in real time for speed, their direction, their location. We know where our drivers are, how fast they're moving, and if they've stopped for a coffee. Our trucks also have dash cams and electronic sensors to sound alarms if other drivers get too close. Packaging is robust. It's certified for safety by the CNSC. Packages are designed to withstand extreme conditions, including fire, submersion in water, even a collision with a train or being dropped off a 10-story building. Just to reiterate, before I turn it over to Liam, we're really proud of our drivers, or the track record they've established, and we believe transportation is extremely safe. So Liam, I apologize for the mishap there, but I'll pass it to
you. Sure, that was great. I would only add that we've had a similar experience, that the transportation of radioactive waste has been and continues to be safely carried out. As Jason mentioned, it is rigorously regulated. We have both the transportation of dangerous goods regulations, as well as the CNSC's packaging and transport of nuclear substances regulations. One additional thought I would add in, and I'm sure Jason's OPG does it as well, but we have an audit process that we carry out with our contracted transporters on a regular basis, and any findings, which are usually minor in nature, are communicated to them, and they're tracked to completion by Cameco. So we have had and continue to enjoy a very strong record of safely transporting, and that's not to say that we don't remain focused on that to ensure that that record continues.
Yeah, maybe I can add to what my colleague said. Maybe I can bring the international perspective to the transportation of used nuclear fuel. As my colleague said, the transportation of used nuclear fuel is a process that is highly regulated. But from an international perspective, there is a huge experience in transporting used nuclear fuel. And used nuclear fuel, in particular in Europe, is being transported all the time using roads, rail, and even in water. And we have more than 50 years of experience with the transportation of used nuclear fuel, and over 50 years of transportation. There hasn't been any single accident that led to the release of radioactive material into the environment. And because the philosophy around the transportation of used nuclear fuel revolve around the robustness of the containers that are used. So we use certified containers that by regulations will have to maintain their integrity and their content regardless of the accident scenario that you can imagine.
Great. There are a couple of questions particular to NWMO. And I just want to, while I have the mic, make a plug for the CNSC and the presentation that is going to be going to the commission at the commission meeting at the end of April, specifically on the NWMO. And I believe NWMO will also be presenting. So lots of good questions here. I do want to kind of not give the impression that these questions are not important. They are. I just want to focus on what we're here to talk to today. With respect to incineration, the word incineration of radioactive material sort of has a connotation that kind of gets people a little bit concerned. So if you can, Jason, you spoke to it, and I know Liam, this is also an activity that is done at the Blind River Refinery, and so incineration of radioactive waste. Can you speak a little bit to that and tell us what that is, how that is done, and what methods are used, and what safety measures are in place when that is done?
Okay, we'll switch it up. I'll start, and then I'll hand it over to Jason on that front. But as you mentioned, Kavita, we do have an incinerator at our Blind River Refinery. That incinerator was the subject of a federal and provincial environmental assessment before it was licensed and approved by the CNSC in the province of Ontario. The emissions from that facility are strictly controlled and closely monitored to ensure that the wastes are safely disposed of, and the ash from this process is recoverable for the uranium content. So in that regard, a significant volume reduction, very closely regulated in relation to emissions, and the ash, the uranium in the ash is then used as a recoverable byproduct.
Yeah, thanks, Liam. I mean, ours operates in a similar fashion. The ash is recoverable, the radioactivity is contained within the ash and then stored within our site at the Bruce facility. I'd just add a few things in terms of our incinerator. We've recently invested $30 million in upgrading that incinerator. I'm sure it will last us another 15 years. As I mentioned earlier, it helps us reduce volumes by as much as 90% or more than 90% when it's up and running. So the same with Liam. Our stack is monitored by the Ministry of Environment. We stay well below our regulatory emissions requirements, and we're just about actually at OPG to enter into an outage to do maintenance to keep that critical tool up and running and performing well. So we're very we rely on our incinerator, Kavita.
Okay, I'm sorry to say that we haven't yet been able to get Mike Gull on, but I know that I know that there are a lot of projects that CNL as the contractor for ACL has been involved in. So unfortunately, we will not be able to get his perspective on a number of the questions that come up. But here's a question, and this is for the whole panel. Given that Canada has launched a policy overhaul of the management of radioactive waste, does it make more sense if proponents pause any ongoing initiatives until the policy and the strategy are finalized? What are your thoughts on that? We'll go first with Ben, and then with Jason, and then Liam. You're on mute.
Kavita, I was just saying I didn't get the first part of the question. Can the proponents do what? Pause?
Yeah, so given that Canada has launched a policy overhaul of the waste strategy, and does it then make more sense if proponents pause any ongoing initiatives until the policy and the strategy are finalized? What is the rationale for continuing with initiatives when you know that there will be a policy that is going to be worked on, that is being worked on right now?
Well, I think from my perspective, I think all the organizations that are managing radioactive waste continue to manage their waste, because in Canada, we do have very good waste management programs. I mean, all the waste owners, as we've seen from this panel, are managing their waste in a safe and very responsible manner, and that will continue. And I think what the policy will bring is a little bit more integration at the national level. But in Canada, we do have, we just completed the joint convention on the safety of radioactive waste, and Canada was praised for the programs we have when it comes to radioactive waste management, the way they are managed and the way they are regulated.
Yeah, I know we're running short on time, but I would say we're at OPG, we're watching this policy debate with real interest to see if it identifies some new solutions for us. But as Ben said, in the meantime, we're still governed by existing policies and regulations. These include our requirements for financial guarantees for permanent disposal. So that requires each utility to be responsible for their own disposal. So while we will continue to be governed by the current policy until a new one is available. So.
Yeah, and from our perspective, we feel that waste is generally well managed, and these projects are taking place in that broader context. Again, those projects have followed the applicable regulatory process over many years, and they're being safely and successfully carried out. The review is at a policy level, so it might identify some gaps at that level, and maybe some opportunities for improvement at a project level, but that can be taken into account as these other activities proceed or other plans are made.
Fantastic. Thank you. I think we're out of time, so I want to close off by thanking all of you for your time, for your presentation, for your thoughts and perspectives. I want to thank NWMO for hosting and giving an opportunity to discuss this. And I want to thank everyone who joined us today. Thank you and have a good Waste Summit.